Okay.
Can you
sorry.
get me now? Okay,
I can
welcome.
Thank you so much.
We are thrilled
Not the
that you're
smoothest
here.
transition we had hoped for, but I apologize.
Hey,
It was great.
we're still working on some of those transitions and trying to
That's
get them correct.
I'm
we
glad
have
to be
people,
here with you, Mark. Thank you.
Well, and we've got people over in the Philippines that are helping us.
Yeah.
We've got people here in our back still helping us. So we've got a lot of moving parts going on here to make this look as casual as possible.
Great.
Hey, you and I have an awful lot in common. Other than the fact that we've both been pastors, you're still a pastor at Faith Bible. We've kind of
You
followed.
must be married to an amazing woman.
And that's another thing that we have in common. I'm married to an amazing woman. Both got degrees at DTS. Both have been connected with Grace School of Theology. Both have been pastors in multiple places.
And at the same church.
And at the same church. And
Yes.
both of us married to incredible women.
Yeah.
But I do have a question for you. Let me take you back to your DTS background real quick. You got a THM there. Did you have I know you had Old or New Testament studies, but did you have a favorite class? Was there something that a class that you took that you just went, oh man, this just made my seminary experience?
Probably. But it's hard to maybe designate. I really fell in love with languages. And that touched a part of my learning in my mind, that my heart really, that I hadn't discovered fully yet. But there was one really important class, and I can't remember the name of the class. I can't remember the professor, but it was right in the middle of my career. So it took me 6 years. So this may be the end of my third year. And we were reading a book that I was just looking at on my shelf the other day. It's a rather small book called Pastoral Care in the Classical Tradition. So it follows five. Are you familiar with the book, sir?
Yes.
It follows five old dead guys, most of them from the Middle Ages, like Gregory of Nazianzus and all these guys that nobody's ever heard of, right? And
yep.
unless
you're in seminary.
Unless you're in seminary.
And then you've heard of them.
I was asked with the rest of the class to really do, I'm not trying to be sideways here, but really do rather an undergraduate level thing. And that is just read the book and write a report on it, And so you're not really interacting with it. You're just proving that you read it. And so, okay, fine. But at the time, I think I was running away from pastoral ministry. I had some wounds from the church and ministry, and I was trying to figure that out and not doing it very well, probably. And so I thought, you know what? I think I'll do academics and I'll be a professor, and so that'll get me around people in the church and the Bible, and but maybe it'll save me some pain from quote unquote church ministry. And it was that class, specifically that book and that project, that changed my heart. And so I read that book, and the thesis of the book is all those five guys are theological giants. They sort of saved the church in many ways, and from orthodoxy, for orthodoxy from heresy. And they all said the same thing. The local church is where the action is. We are local church pastors first. And it just changed my heart. And so I remember going to my wife, my great wife, and saying, I think God is calling me to be a pastor. And she said, it's about time. And I was like, excuse me? And she said, I've been praying, for years.
See?
Yeah, I knew it, and she knew it. She knew it, and then I caught up. So there you go. That was probably the defining moment.
It's a fascinating thing that God has supplied you with a woman who has that kind of discernment and could see that long before you did. I think that's a blessing from God, personally.
It is. That's one of her many. She has many spiritual gifts, but that's one of the best ones. So
yeah. So
other than that, I enjoyed some theology. I enjoyed Greek. I enjoyed preaching. I really followed some professors more than classes, but they weren't the professors that most people from DTS would talk about during my era. They were, a couple of them were adjunct professors. A guy named Will Johnston, who was a classics major at University of Texas, and then THM and PhD, and he spoke 5 languages and just was an incredible guy. Guys like Richard Taylor, other men Elliot Johnson, who were incredible.
Jewel of a man.
Yeah, exactly. I always call him a prince of a guy. Yes. So those men were very, very instrumental. I wouldn't say one particular class, but people people were and
Yeah.
things that the Lord did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, you made a statement in there that you were running away from the church because of past hurts, and God used this specific book to really move you back to his vehicle for revealing himself in the world today, moving you back to the church. So let me ask you, fast forward. I know you were in several different churches to get your pastoral experience. You land at Faith Bible. You've been there how long?
I've been a lead pastor for almost 11 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you found a home. He's doing some amazing things. Just share with us just for a moment, what's your love? What's your pastoral love? What is it about the church, and what is it that you do that you go, I'm really walking in my sweet spot right now?
Wow. So when I became a Christian at 19 in college, I started volunteering at a local Baptist church, and then I got connected with a church in the Woodlands,
Yep.
and that's only, I would consider that my first real church, but that's my first and only Faith Community Church, now Faith Bible Church, where I
Yes.
serve. It's only the second church I've ever been a part of. So I had a long stint at one church, which was brilliant and great, and I still have great friendships there. Seminary kind of right in between and overlapping with my time at Faith Bible.
Yep.
And so it is and was a tension between two things. And that was, and it's interesting because I see the same tension in people, almost everyone that I meet, who's theistic or has a love for the church. And that is this: they know the local church is important. They believe that the local church is the hope of the world, if they want to say it that way, and the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. And Jesus has massive import and plans for the body of Christ on the earth. That's on one hand. And on the other hand, they've collected some wounds at various depths from Christians in the church. And how they manage the tension between those two things really determines a lot about a person's sanctification and spiritual development. And so I think that's what I was working with and on. And so I don't have a lot of wounds from the church. So I grew up again in a Catholic community, only one church, one Catholic church. And so I grew up a theist. I grew up believing truths, but never understanding, at least in my perspective, in my context, never understanding the gospel and how that worked and what it meant for my life. That happened in college. But afterwards, I was confused. I got hurt. Some decisions. I made some mistakes, or a lot of mistakes, and collect these things over time, and how you handle that is very important. So I wasn't handling it well. I was sort of hiding. I was running away. I was trying to find better places, safer places. And that was just the opposite, I think, of what God wanted me to do. He wanted me to meet him in the difficulty, to meet him in the pain, in the wounds, and turn those scars, broken bones into stronger places. Not to steal the title from a conference that we're about to go to, right? But I think David said, may the bones that you have broken rejoice. And he's talking about that in the Psalms, about all these places where I've been wounded. I want to be stronger there. I don't want to hide. I don't want to flinch. And so I think that really happened when I met Dave Anderson, when I met Faith Community Church folks, which is now Faith Bible Church, the church I serve at. That's when that, and some spiritual mentors and developers at seminary, guys like Bruce Baumgardner, who's one of my heroes, a pastor down in South Houston, and who really helped me walk a different way and encouraged me to seek better answers than just hiding and trying to find safe places. So, and in that process, my love for the local church, which was always there, was completely transformed and deepened. And I cannot even fathom not serving and working in the local church. It's my chief love besides Jesus and my family. So.
That's fantastic. You
I have a tendency to talk too much. If you ask a good question, I tend to talk too much. I'm sorry.
This is
I'm long-winded.
Well, here's the beauty of Grace Cafe. We want to hear about you. so I'm going to let you run, brother. This is good. I want to shift because you alluded to this. We have this conference coming up on Saturday. You are our middle speaker, plenary speaker, the second one.
Yeah.
It is called Strong at the Broken Places, and the idea behind this is that life breaks us, hurts, failures, trials, suffering, our own sin. Life breaks us, but God enters into that brokenness and creates strength and beauty if we will allow Him to. And it's strength and beauty that He creates that would not be created had not that brokenness occurred.
Absolutely.
You and I might look at that and say, I see that's God's grace. His graciousness of walking into the brokenness, maybe interestingly enough, allowing the brokenness, stepping into that brokenness, and out of that, creating something that is stronger, more beautiful. You alluded to that. You don't want to hide from those. You want to see those brought out and strengthened, see those brought out and see that creation happen. Talk to me just for a minute, because you've talked about grace, and I've heard you preach on grace. You do a great job. You've written a little booklet on grace. Talk just a moment about how you see God's grace in your own life, where you see that, where He has shown up, and poured His grace upon you. Just that's a huge question, I know, but I'm. Yeah, and just give us a 30-second overview on that.
Sure. Well, I'm convinced of one thing, and that is this: that God's grace is. I want to say this as accurately as possible, without any exaggerated words or flowery language. Right. So God's grace is always infinitely more than I ever expect or think that it is. And so when I first started to understand grace, right, I was a new believer. I'm saved by grace. Oh yeah, Ephesians 2, I got that. I read all that passage and I understood it. Okay, it's a free gift. I started to, and then as I start to dive into it more, it opens up not a new room, but a new wing. And then I explore that wing. And then that leads to a whole new acre, and then that acre leads to another continent, and I'm like, wait a second. And so that idea just there doesn't seem to be a bottom to it. And again, please, I don't know if people are hearing me wrong. I don't want anybody to hear any of the negative. I can do what I want. I'm free to do it. That's not what I'm meaning at all. Just God's power. Specifically, God's sovereignty, which I think is a topic of great conversation these days, and a topic that I'm very passionate about because I feel like the conversation is lopsided, and it's like in a spinning chair or something. It's really strange for me. But God's sovereign ability to overrule things is an aspect of His grace. I mean, so when we sin, or when we get sinned against, when an earthquake happens because of the curse or whatever, only God's sovereign power and grace can transform those very places of our woundedness, our own failure and sin, into a training ground for greater ministry. That's the school. And I know of no other way of thinking. I know of no other religious thought. I know of no other philosophy of human history where that is even approximated, other than in the gospel of grace by Jesus Christ. And so that idea is just the most resplendent, magnificent truth I've ever heard. And I see it in every page of the scripture. And so every time I sit with Jesus, every morning, every Sunday, every whatever, that seems to be the seed of it all. And so losing myself in your question, but I'm enamored by it.
Let me back it up, because you made a statement that, and this is getting a little off track, but I want to walk down this just for a second.
I warned you.
The statement is this. There is this conversation about the sovereignty of God. And the confusion, I think, that happens is that the sovereignty of God is he can do whatever he wants. And it typically has a negative attitude. He can do whatever he wants. What you've just reframed is his sovereignty is encased in grace.
Right.
And that completely shifts the focus of what that sovereignty is about. Does that make sense?
Yes, I would say that it's either negative or explanatory. So when they want to say, well, why did that happen? Well, God's sovereign. So it becomes an explanation. Again, I can handle that. There's something close to biblical about that. Okay, right? But what I want to preserve is what I see when it comes to the scriptures. When it talks about God's foreknowledge, when it talks about God's election, predestination, all of these places in the scripture, everyone I find, and I know we're a little off topic, but we'll come back.
We're going to circle back around in a minute.
are meant to be an encouragement to the believer. And so rather than an explanatory or a negative context of sovereignty, I would rather us adjust to what I feel like is a more biblical, and maybe we could call it a redemptive view of sovereignty. And that's where God enters into those places, because only he can. Only his sovereign power can. Ruled and encapsulated, however you beautifully said it, by his grace, to work for our good and to transform, funerals into parties and ashes into dancing and all of those things. Only he can do that. So only he can say, exactly, that's what I was going to say. Only he can say, where you are broken, I will make you stronger. Nobody else says that. No other belief system says that. And we can even see that in science.
That's right.
They even say when you break a bone, it becomes a little stronger in that place. And I think that's just a little God wanted to send us a little picture and say, that's how I work.
Because what we have a tendency to say is, where I'm broken, if that's God's sovereignty, that is God's, I don't want to say punishment, but that's the negative side of it. Okay, I'm broken.
Action against me,
that's a good way to put it, action against me. Whereas the grace side of it says, watch how God enters into that brokenness and creates something new, creates something beautiful, creates something strong, that God can even take the brokenness that is there and use it, because he's a gracious God. He is a loving God. He is a God who has your best and knows that your good is his glory. Mm-hmm. That the encompassing of that, it forms a beautiful new foundation to what sovereignty means.
Right.
And I love that. Well, let me push this a little bit further, because there's another area that you and I have a little bit in common. We both have incredible wives who have suffered through some pretty significant health issues. And I know you and I had a brief conversation on this some time ago, where we just talked about what does it mean to be the spouse of somebody who is suffering, and really suffering in a situation where I'm not quite sure how do I support that. I'd love to fix it, but it's not my fix. So in that context, and again, I don't want to give away your message on Saturday, but within that context, how do you see God's grace overlaid in the midst of that context in 30 seconds or less?
I fully believe, God is in the heavens and he does whatever he wants. Psalm 115, right? I'm just talking through Ecclesiastes 5. God is in the heavens, you are on the earth, let your words be few as you approach God. Okay, and so all that said and understood, my biggest complaint, if I'm allowed a complaint against God, not a Jobin kind of complaint, is that the suffering of my life has always been in the chair next to me, not in the chair that I'm sitting in. And so I have had a relatively simple life. My parents are still married. I had a relatively easy school career, college career. I never had any trauma. I was never grossly abused. I never even had a surgery other than wisdom teeth surgery. I've never been under anesthesia outside of that. I was a clumsy kid, so I had some stitches and stuff, broke some bones, but and that's it. 44, going on 44 years old. My life is a boring television show, right? And so when it comes to those kinds of events, but in the concentric circle immediately outside of me, in every direction, there has been significant difficulty, abuse, trauma, catastrophic things. And I've been over and over and over just one step removed from that. And that has both been my complaint, but also this possible. My next statement can sound a little self-serving or arrogant, and I don't mean it that way. But my biggest complaint is, why hadn't this happened to me? I would love for this to happen to me to spare all the other people. But it seems to say, I seem to hear God saying, no, I want you to be the one step away from all of those people. Not that I'm the savior or I have some sort of secret sauce or that my words are healing balm or anything like that. But he seems to put me in that position, and I'm still in process. I'm trying to understand his purpose in that for me. And so the title of my talk for the Saturday conference is My Life Next to Chronic Pain, because I've never been in chronic pain, and I struggle to understand it. And so, yes, my amazing, godly, I'm going to get emotional. My wife is my best friend, and she is, I would rather be with her than anybody, and she's amazing. She's had a hard life. Before we met, she had a hard life, lots of difficulty. And since we met, so 11 years ago, she had her first brain surgery for a non-cancerous, not tumor, congenital disease called an Arnold-Chiari malformation of the cerebellum. And as a professional ballerina and choreographer and dancer, teacher, it could have ended her really mobility. It could have made her paralyzed from the neck down. So the first surgery 11 years ago, that led to a second similar surgery about 5 years ago. And that's when the chronic pain started, about that time. So she's had a pretty strong headache, constant, every day, all day, for the past 5 or 6 years. And then a pretty intense neuropathy over her hands and feet and spine for the past 5 years. And with the third brain surgery just about 20 months ago. And so that has been difficult. She has met it with the most amazing grace and endurance. But I still remember, and it wasn't long ago, where we both, very similar timing, we both hit the wall. And it was just a wall of fatigue. We hit it probably, 4.5, 5 years in. And we just kept muscling through it. And again, not by ourselves. We have an incredible church community, incredible family. And doing it alone, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here without the church. But we still, I almost felt it in a week or whatever it was. We just hit a wall, and we just looked at each other. We said, now we're at the bottom. We're at empty. There's nothing left in the tank. And so managing that and being, a year beyond that, year and a half beyond that, whole new level. And so every day's an education for us. Yeah. Every day's a step of faith.
I can identify. My wife has chronic pain as well. 10 concussions and rheumatoid arthritis and a number of other things. And I have told her so many times that she gets up and has pain all day long. I get a splinter and I'm complaining and crying and, oh, woe is me and horrible. And my splinter comes out and I'm done. But she's just to power through that every single day. And I'm constantly amazed at the strength and the foundation of her faith that continues to blossom even in the midst of this really difficult and trying circumstance. And I see that as nothing but God's grace, that He has lavished her with this grace. We had a friend of ours when I was pastoring out in Midland who said, I think that her greatest ministry is the ministry that she will never see, and that is how other people watch her walk through this difficulty with such grace and such poise. So
I can echo that. There was a moment where my wife Liza said in the middle of this, and it was within the last 5 or 6 years, watching what our kids are teenagers now, a little younger than yours, but our kids are 13, 14, and a boy and a girl. I'm biased, I get it, but I think they're great kids. And
it's okay, you can be biased on that.
watching them soften towards people, watching them be more compassionate, watching them pray more, watching them weep and pray for mom's healing, watching them ask really appropriate, and I don't know if there's inappropriate, great questions of God and about God, and grow in their spiritual. They both trusted in Jesus. But watching all of that, my wife said, knowing this and seeing this in just our kids, not to mention, like you said, the unseen stories, I would do it all again. This made it worth it. And so that was a moment. And we have to remind ourselves of that moment and that truth of what God showed us. But that was a moment that, again, I think only God's grace can accomplish. Only God's grace can bring a moment like that.
Yeah. Would you consider that? Would you consider that to be one of those things that God created out of this brokenness that might not have been created had the brokenness not occurred? Yes,
absolutely. He molded something new, ex nihilo, if you want to say, and I say allowed, or whatever you want to say. His sovereign control, I believe all that, right? Brought us into this situation because of the curse and the world and the destruction and corruption of all things. But he took that and he formed something new out of it and made something that did not exist. He made something new, and it is a ministry. It is a testimony. It gives him glory. It gives us hope. It gives us vision in the dark. And that is the way you said it, Mark. I love that. That's really beautiful. Yeah, but that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and let me kind of wrap us up here.
Sure.
We have a conference on Saturday, an all-day conference. This is the focal point. Strong at the Broken Places. Again, Scott, you have graciously offered not only your church, but you've graciously offered yourself. I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say about being in chair number 2. I'm the one who sits next to the one who is walking through this. That's what I call it,
the second chair. Yeah, the second chair.
Yeah,
that horribly uncomfortable green chair right next to the hospital bed. You know that chair.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know who invented or designed that chair, but they should be put in prison because but that's the chair I'm talking about,
Yeah, that we all know folds out into a bed that's really the most uncomfortable thing you've ever slept on in your life. Yeah, got it. I'm there with you. So we got this
the
conference.
Ugly cousin of the airport chair. And
there's a message in there somewhere about the ugly chair. That'll preach, I think. Scott, thank you for coming on. We look forward to hearing from you on Saturday. The conference is all day long. You can go to gsot.edu/conference or /center to register. Still spots available. 24 breakout speakers. We've got 3 plenary speakers, Scot Pollok being one, Dr. Anderson, Carmen Pate, David Dunn in a concert that night out of his brokenness that we interviewed him last week. We're just looking for a fantastic day. Scott, thank you for your time. We appreciate it, and just spending a little time with us, getting to know you a little bit better, and hearing some of your heart. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll be back next week. My guest will be Scott Ray, my brother. Look forward to talking with him about faith and work and ethics and those types of things. But thank you all for being with us. This has been the Grace Cafe. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much.